Okay, this is called the Carboniferous period. So in North America, what we tend to do is take the Carboniferous period and divide it up into the Mississippian period and then the Pennsylvanian period. But if you put those two together, that's the Carboniferous period, and then that's the way that they normally refer to it in Europe. All right, let's take a look at what has happened to all of the continents. So now you've seen that the Appalachians finished forming when North America collides with Africa to form the supercontinent of Pangaea. So this is between 355 and 300 million years ago. So advance your animation until you're at around 320 million years, and you will see that Africa has finally slammed into North America and Europe to form the supercontinent of Pangaea. So what's going on in the oceans? Well, not really much. So you still have all of the basic creatures that are in the oceans today are pretty much in the oceans back then. On the land, you have amphibians and insects are dominating. But you have the first appearance of reptiles. But the reptiles are small in comparison to the amphibians, so they are dominating. And you have a lot of swampy areas. So you're going to have lots of horsetails and ferns, and they make these gigantic forests that would have existed back then. And they were in a swampy environment, so when one of these trees would fall into the swamp, it would get covered up by water very quickly before it would have a chance to decompose. And then other trees would fall on top of it, so that you're going to have layer after layer after layer of organic material that is being covered up and not being allowed to decompose. And then that organic material is going to be compressed together, and eventually it's going to turn into coal. Now, out in the oceans, you're going to have lots of teeny tiny microscopic organisms that are going to, as they die, they're going to go to the bottom of the ocean floor, and they're going to get covered up and not be allowed to decompose. And then their organic material is going to be compressed together to make oil. So most of the oil and most of the coal that we use today is like 300 million years old. Okay, and so that's pretty much what was going on in the world at this time. So now let's fast forward to the Permian period. Okay, so now you notice that there's more land sticking up out of the water. So the climate is drying out. Reptiles are beginning to challenge the amphibians for dominance. Now, what advantage does a reptile have over the amphibian? So why were they so successful? Okay, an amphibian has to go back to water in order to lay its eggs. But a reptile has its embryo inside of a leathery shell that it can deposit on the land. So how many frogs do you find out in the middle of a desert? Not many, okay? But how many snakes do you find out in the middle of a desert? Yeah. All right, so notice that these reptiles now can go into ecological niches that the amphibians just cannot go into. So the reptiles are beginning to dominate over the amphibians. You have the first seed plants. So prior to this, you had the seedless plants like ferns that had their genetic material underneath the leaves. Well, now that genetic material can be protected in a seed. And then that seed can be protected in a cone. So we have our first conifers. The first evergreen trees are making their appearance during this time period. And you're also going to have the first types of mammal-like reptiles. So they're still reptiles, but they're starting to have mammal-like characteristics. Okay, now at the end of the period of the Permian is going to be what's referred to as the Permian extinction. So this is going to occur at 251 million years ago, or December the 11th on our cosmic calendar. And so there was outpourings of lava in Siberia that released just tremendous amounts of flood basalts. And if it was poured over the United States, it would have covered the entire United States to a depth of something like 2 meters. So it was a tremendous outpouring of lava, which meant that it was a tremendous outpouring of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And so carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, which meant that the climate warmed up tremendously. And as the oceans warmed up as a result of it, it might have unfrozen methane in the ocean. And so that methane came out, and methane is also a greenhouse gas. So it got even hotter. And so this was the largest mass extinction in the history of the Earth. 95% of all life on Earth died during this Permian extinction. Okay, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to find out what happened, who survived after the Permian extinction.